And we're recording. Welcome, Anita.
Thank you, Tim.
Now, this is our first podcast together. In fact, this is my first podcast ever.
Wow. And this is pretty exciting because we have so many interesting conversations, and often I think, I wish we could record it, and we're actually going to attempt to do that now.
Yeah, I must admit, I was quite reluctant to do this because
Really? I noticed.
I thought that this would be an exercise in navel gazing, and full disclosure, we're a married couple, so it almost seems like a bit of a cheat, doesn't it?
Yeah, it might seem like a setup, but it's not really. This is going to be very raw and unrehearsed.
Excellent. Now, our relationship isn't 100% smooth, as is the case with all married couples. One thing we tend to clash over is social media, isn't it?
Oh yeah, there's lots of social media disagreements. Because you are the parent expert and I'm the layman, but I'm sometimes winning the numbers game against you.
Yes, so for people who are unaware, and if anyone is listening to this podcast, you probably are aware of this, my wife Anita has quite an impressive social media presence, which she just seemed to, it seemed to be a happy accident. She seemed to fall into it, and as a result of her posts on social media, she actually ended up on a national television show in Australia called The War on Waste, Season 2, which stemmed from her activity on social media.
But it didn't start smoothly, and I actually had Facebook twice, personal accounts, and I closed them both each time because they were so stressful and they made me feel so bad about myself. And it was actually a big deal to set up again the third time, but I decided to do that about plastic and not about my personal life, and that's when things changed.
Right, so that's quite a broad topic, plastic. I'm interested in this because my day job is actually helping executives and multinational businesses establish their presence on social media. So the messaging is very tightly controlled, and as a result, it is a challenge for the people I work with to get engagement, because really the way you get engagement on social media is to step outside your comfort zone, which is a frightening thing. I mean, just doing this podcast for me is a frightening thing, hearing my own voice. So, but you are quite, I would say on social media, when you post, your posts are quite bold, aren't they? You really do put yourself on the line and expose yourself.
Yeah, completely exposed, and I won't let anyone dictate or influence my approach. I won't adjust a post based on who I think it might offend, and I don't deliberately do a post just to offend. Basically, it's completely from the heart, and I will do whatever feels right at that moment, and I can't screen myself. I'm completely honest and authentic, and every post is authentic and purely from me. No one else writes it or dictates it or screens it. Yeah, it's just from my heart.
Okay, so you said you tried social media in the past, Facebook in particular, a couple of times. You closed your accounts and you reopened them, and you started posting about plastic, and that's when your content really began to get noticed. What is it about this subject of plastic that you're so passionate about?
If you had told me 5 years ago that I would even be interested in plastic or be posting about plastic, I probably wouldn't have believed you. It's such a bizarre topic to attach myself to. But really, I'm an efficient person. I appreciate the planet. I want to live as sustainably as I can without, I don't call myself a hippie or a greenie. And I don't smoke pot. I'm extremely conservative. But I decided to do an experiment where I would just keep my plastic waste for a couple of weeks and see how much the pile grew. Anyway, it was an enormous pile, and I took a photo of myself sitting in it, and I sent it to a newspaper, and I call it public shaming myself into plastic awareness. And I set myself the goal of researching plastic to see if this plastic pile I was making every fortnight was doing any harm to the planet, or if our government was taking care of it and it was being recycled and looked after the way that we are led to believe it is when we pop everything in the bin, and also to know which bin things go in, because that can be really complicated. So I just decided I'd make it a little personal hobby just to research it. And oh my goodness, the moment I took the first step, I knew I discovered something monumental that would just be, it would affect the entire globe and the future of humankind. And I worked that out immediately, and I pretty much went into shock. Yeah, so it launched me to this place where I just felt I absolutely had to. I had no choice. It was like I felt everyone was ignorant to it because we were led to be ignorant to it. We are taught not to worry about it. But I know now that we absolutely have to worry about it. And I need to spread the knowledge that I've gained and continue to gain. And it's terrifying, really.
Yes, I remember that image, that photograph you took. It was your first image that really went viral on social media, and I must admit, I never thought about plastic at all until you took that photo. It was quite confronting. In fact, in the show notes for this podcast, we'll actually have a link to that image. I mean, I just always presumed that the virtuous thing to do was to take the plastic you had used, for instance, a plastic water bottle, a meat tray, whatever, and put it in the bin with a yellow lid, and it's not a problem. It'd be recycled and it would just go back into the circular plastic economy. But that was probably a misplaced belief, wasn't it?
It's a belief that we're taught. It's actually what we're presented with. It's what they want us to believe. So you're not misguided or unintelligent for believing that. I believed it. We all believe it because we're taught to believe it. The government tells us that. And even the recycling company, like, they have this glossy brochure, and on the front it actually has a diagram saying closing the loop, and it has arrows of the plastic going into the plant and coming out again as a new product, and that it's circular. But this is a deliberate misconception. So that's why you thought that, that's why I thought that, but it's completely untrue. In most cases, it's completely untrue.
Right, so this isn't just your opinion. You actually, as part of your self-education, you actually snuck into a recycling plant, didn't you?
Yeah, so that was right at the beginning. So my first step was to contact my local council. So I contacted the council and I started asking them about what bins to put my recycling in, what happens to it, and very quickly they didn't have the answers and they told me to go to the recycling company. So then I emailed my recycling company and they answered a few, and then they didn't answer them all, and they sent me back to the council, and it's just they were both just sending me to each other, and I started to get a bit frustrated and suspicious. And then they both basically shut down and refused to answer any more of my questions. And at that point, alarm bells went off. Like, what are they hiding? I'm just a mum in an outer suburb trying to find out which bin to put my waste in. Why are they shutting me out? And why is a corporation suddenly scared of me? And so, then I decided to actually do a tour of the plant undercover, and they knew who I was through my communication. So I actually accepted the hard hat and glasses they gave me. And the person doing the tour was someone who I'd actually met at a seminar. So there was a high chance she would recognise me. So I hid myself, and I was hiding at the back of the queue, and then I went into a separate group with someone who didn't know me, and I signed my signature really messily so they couldn't read my name. And I was looking for security cameras. But yeah, that's the funny side, but it was not a very funny experience. And that's the thing that probably launched me on this mission. It was devastating.
Yeah, we'll talk about why that's devastating in a moment. I just want to focus on this aspect of your personality, which, even though I know you, we're married, it always seems to surprise me. A criticism that is levelled at social media and the people that use social media as well, you're not actually achieving anything, you're not actually making any real change happen by simply posting content on social media, because it's a virtual world, it exists in this virtual bubble. But in your case, the content you're posting is things you are actually doing in the real world, like actually physically sneaking into a recycling plant to find out what is happening with our plastic waste. That's something that you really did. You're only posting about it afterwards. So that's always impressed me about you, that you would actually physically put yourself in awkward situations.
And at that time, I didn't know anyone, and I hadn't set up my pages. It was right at the beginning. I had no support. You were the only person that knew that I went there. I couldn't send messages to everyone and go, I'm about to do this, help me out here. Or if I got pulled into a back room or security came, I had no one to call. I had no backup. I had no organisation anywhere or support network. I was completely on my own. So it was quite terrifying, because there was no safe base to call or come and rescue me. Yeah, so it was a big deal to do it, actually. But I couldn't not, and that's been the whole process with this, is that I couldn't not do it. My conscience just takes me along and I follow.
So what is it about this subject of plastic, particularly plastic waste, that people are responding to? Because when you began, you were almost a lone voice in the wilderness. There were some other exceptional individuals as well.
But I didn't know them at the time. They came into my life later.
Now, a couple of years on from when you began, plastic is in mainstream news now.
Yes.
What is it about this subject that's resonating with people? Why do they care about this subject?
Well, I think there are a lot of people like me who just had this suspicion and this uncomfortable feeling in their stomach that there's something not quite right with this picture, and that all our food's in plastic, and that we're accepting plastic everywhere, and it's all on our fresh food, and there's just this feeling in your stomach that makes you go, I don't know if this is right. But because everyone's doing it, we go, well, everyone's doing it, so it must be right. It must be okay because everyone's doing it. And so we uncomfortably went along with this for years. And then when I started looking into it and I found out it's definitely not all right, and then I think some people were taking the same journey at the same time and came to the same conclusion, but I think there were also a lot of people like me who hadn't had the time to pursue investigating it themselves, and when they saw me doing it, they went, oh hell yeah, that's what I think. I was worried about this too. I wanted to know what happened to my recycling. And so I ended up becoming kind of the voice and the body and the spirit for a lot of people who didn't have the voice or the time to pursue it themselves. So then they kind of gravitated toward me with gratitude, because I was their voice. I was them, but I was a bit louder.
Right.
And I dedicated more time to it.
So why is plastic waste so bad? I mean, this seems like a no-brainer of a question, but a lot of people are still quite apathetic about it because it's so convenient. It's so convenient to buy food and drink in plastic. Why should we care about where it goes?
The issue is quantity, how much is being produced. So at the moment, 300 million tonnes of plastic is produced per year. 8 million tonnes washes into the ocean per year. The prediction for plastic production is that it will quadruple by 2050, which is not far away, and that by that stage there will be more plastic in the ocean than fish. If you can just comprehend that little handful of facts, it's completely mind-blowing. And at a positive estimate, 9 to 10% of plastic is being recycled. So nearly all of that is waste. And from my research, the plastic that is being recycled usually is only recycled once, and then it goes to landfill. I call recycling plastic stopping for a coffee break on its way to landfill, because that's all it is. In most cases, it's just revamped once into another item, maybe a plumbing pipe, maybe a plastic bench to sit on, and then it's landfill. So it's given maybe a 10 to 20 year life, and then it just ends up with the rest. And there's so much plastic being produced, and it's now it's been in the environment long enough now to break down into very small pieces, and it's so prolific that it's killing millions of marine life. It's being found, whole chip bags are being found in fish. There's been a spate of whales who have been washed up and found dead with their stomachs just full of plastic. Shopping bags, chip bags, rubber thongs. It's horrific. And it's now affecting the fish. It affects their reproduction. And we're eating the fish, and the microparticles are in the flesh of the fish. And also it's in the air we breathe. There's even like the dust is now becoming filled with plastic. It's in tap water. It's in bottled water. It's been found in honey, in beer, and for decades, millions of tonnes has been chopped up and sprayed onto our crop fields. So, and the scientists are now worried that the chemicals may be absorbed into the plants that we're eating, as well as that's all in soil that when it rains will eventually end up in the ocean. It's incomprehensible how enormous this problem is.
To me, that sounds apocalyptic, and I don't use that term lightly, and I'm not using it to criticise your concern either. I find it interesting that even though plastic and the concerns about plastic are now entered the mainstream, from my perspective, it still seems very low on the scale of environmental concerns. Like, for instance, we hear a lot about climate change and the desire to tax polluting industries and things like the carbon tax. But the scenario you described with plastic and how pervasive and ubiquitous it is, it's like literally within the food chain. To me, that almost seems like a bigger problem than the other problems that we're trying to be convinced by media that is a bigger concern.
Well, climate change is an enormous issue, and we're living with evidence of it right now. But I don't feel that many people are prepared to change their lifestyle when it comes to their greenhouse emissions. I don't think I could get many people to not drive the car somewhere today that they don't need to, or to turn off the television to save energy, or to not use the air conditioner. I don't think I can have that influence on people. I think those habits are just too ingrained. But plastic, I feel I can influence people, and I have been. And it's something that is easy to ditch because we can still get the same result without the plastic. So it's something I feel I have a lot more power over influencing. I'm not saying plastic's more important than climate change or vice versa. I just think it's my calling, and I can really have a big impact with plastic compared to other issues. And just a couple of other points about the plastic that we're now eating and breathing. Like, our food is being stored in liquids and drinks, and I just saw that pineapple and some other products are now being switched to plastic sachets rather than tin cans, and they're lining tin cans as well. So our food is being exposed to plastic chemicals over a long period of time before we eat them. And I did a lot of research reading scientific research papers on plastic, and the common element was that you only need very, very small exposure to these chemicals for them to have detrimental effects on your body. And some of the major effects are increase in cancer, smaller genitals in males, baby boys, and increase in estrogen, which can affect breast cancer and lots of other types of cancer, and it's a hormone disruptor. So even small quantities are going to detrimentally affect our health, and yet the quantities we're using are completely staggering.
Yeah, well, see, I'm going to show my cards and reveal like my opinion about the various environmental crises we're facing. I think as a species we will survive climate change because we have in the past. Our ancestors went through climate change, actually survived the thawing of the glaciers during the end of the Ice Age. We've come through devastating climate change, but this is why I think you've picked the right thing to be concerned about. Our ancestors didn't deal with this plastic crisis. It wasn't in their environment. It's not something they created. So personally, I just think this is a much bigger problem, and it concerns me more than a lot of the other problems we're told to worry about.
Because the mass poisoning of our planet, it won't quickly be undone. I don't imagine how it will be undone.
I mean, I've seen all the work you're doing. I read your posts. I'm a lot better educated on this subject now because of what you've done. I've reduced my own personal plastic use. I don't buy coffee in disposable cups anymore. I use a keep cup.
It was one of my greatest moments when I saw you buy a keep cup.
I use a reusable water bottle. I avoid plastic when I can. But I saw a news story the other day about this fish that was caught. And yes, we know fish are swallowing plastic, but this particular fish is known as a coelacanth. And scientists decades ago thought this fish was extinct, but it's actually still alive and it's swimming in the depths. It's essentially a living fossil because it's actually been around for hundreds of millions of years unchanged, but it's still alive, swimming in the ocean now. So it's essentially like a dinosaur. But one of these coelacanths was caught and its stomach was opened up and there was a plastic chip packet in it. So this fish, which is essentially a living fossil that would have survived climate change and disruptions to the biosphere, is now being hammered by plastic, which hasn't been around very long. It's like an infinitesimal amount of time compared to the age of the Earth. So there was just another data point that hit me that this is a much bigger problem than people realise.
And the Japanese whaling, where all the protests and all the concern about the whaling, which is a big issue. I love whales. They're one of my favourite creatures. And I swum with whales and looked eye to eye with the huge humpbacks, and it changed my life. So I have a very strong attachment. But even if the whaling stopped, they're now being killed by plastic. And it's not just one organisation or corporation or nation that's doing it. It's all of us. It's collective humankind behaviour that's causing this possibly mass extinction of animals. And so it's really about individualism and can you change every person's behaviour on the planet and get to the core of why we're behaving the way we do and how to get people to change that behaviour.
Yeah, that's provocative, isn't it? Because the Japanese government, I should say, it's an important distinction. The government of a nation is often separate from the wishes of the people they govern. So the Japanese government is keen to continue whaling, and rightly so. We think that's abhorrent, but really, are we being hypocritical if we're still 100% committed to single-use plastic that may kill a whale in the long term? So we're not firing a harpoon into this beautiful creature, but our lifestyle may inevitably lead to their demise.
Yeah, you're right. It's hypocrisy. And it's a hypocrisy based on a choice of denial. So we choose to deny that what we're doing has a harmful effect because we like what we're doing so much that we don't want to change. So then we deny any consequences, and that denial is achieved by not taking in information or knowledge on the topic. So we shut ourselves off so that we don't learn, so that we don't know, so that we can deny, so that we can keep accepting single-use plastic. And it's not just single-use plastic, it's the whole concept of disposability. Single-use anything and disposability. It's this, we've been taught because businesses want us to buy. So if we buy and then throw away, then we'll buy again. So it's a whole culture that we've been taught. It was a big marketing campaign for years to get us to accept the idea of throwing something away rather than reusing it. And we've become addicted to it. We love it. And so now it's really, really hard to change back because we've developed such a feeling of entitlement. And so, people say when they would all the talk about the bag ban and in the supermarkets of plastic shopping bags, and people said it's my human right to have free plastic bags, and that's pretty much the general approach. And it's only very recently some people starting to change their opinion, but it's been so prolific and given so cheaply and so freely that we now accept it as a human right. And so when you're coming up with a debate against it and trying to get people not to use single-use plastic, you're actually basically arguing with them about what they think is a human right. So you've got to come up with some other angles because otherwise they're going to dig their feet in.
Yeah, this is interesting because while we've spent quite a bit of time talking about the effect of plastic, particularly in the ocean and sea creatures, while you do post content to your social media channels about the effect of plastic on marine life, it's actually photos that you take within a supermarket that get the best engagement. So you will actually go into a supermarket and you'll see, for instance, a sweet potato that is on a plastic tray and sealed in plastic wrap, and you will photograph that and then put some commentary on that. And it's generally those sort of posts that catch people's attention. It's not the posts about the poor turtles with float disease, which means they're filled with plastic and they can no longer submerge, or the dead whales filled with plastic. It's these simple pictures of everyday produce items in the supermarket that people really respond to, isn't it?
Who would have thought that photographing something on a supermarket shelf would become popular on social media? But it's what it represents. So we're all there all the time and we see these things constantly, but we leave our conscience at the supermarket door, except for this tiny feeling in our stomach that goes, oh, there's something wrong with all this plastic. I don't think it's needed, but we switch off to it to protect ourselves from having to challenge ourselves too much, because it's so easy just to copy what everyone else is doing. And I think these photos, so simple, but they make people confront the reality, and that's what they're for. It's like, this is how they're selling, this is what we're buying, look at this. And that's all it takes. And people just are so confronted by seeing it in a still image because they can't deny it anymore. In a supermarket, there's the nice music and there's the nice trolley and everything looks gift wrapped in the shiny lights, and you're just like sucked into the vortex of the wonderful experience of consumerism. But to see a still photo of an overpacked sweet potato on your computer screen, that's very confronting, because then you have to see it outside of the context of the marketing and you know that it's wrong. And the other aspect is we're terrified of standing out as being different. The last thing in the world that most of us want is for someone to turn their head and look at us and think a bad thought and to think we don't fit in or that we're odd. And so just the act of taking a photo in an environment where other people wouldn't do it, or they might think it requires courage, people really respond to that, because a lot of people think, oh, I couldn't do that. And they like that someone as ordinary as me, who's just like them, actually does have the courage to do that. And that's why I think I get a lot of support, because I'm able to like put myself out there. And there's a whole history in my life of why I'm able to put myself out there now. There's a lot of trauma that got me to this point of being able to photograph a sweet potato in a supermarket and post it on social media. There's a whole book about the trauma being written. But yeah, you don't just end up here with no story behind you.
Right, so you're referring to the ebook you recently wrote, Plastic Girl.
Yeah.
We'll have a link to that in the show note.
It's not a how-to book about plastic reduction. It's a raw story about my journey of how I became an activist.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because going into a supermarket with your smartphone and standing in the middle of the fresh produce section and taking photographs of the overwrapped produce, not even photographs, even shooting little video clips and doing a voiceover on the spot.
It's taken 3 years to get to this point. Actually, yesterday I was doing some in-store selfie videos. Yeah, so 3 years to get the courage to do that. That didn't happen overnight, but I got there.
What would you say to your detractors? And you do have detractors, I know, because I've seen some of the more awful comments on your social media channels. What would you say to your detractors who accuse you of just being an exhibitionist and seeking attention? Because this is unusual behaviour, isn't it?
That is just such a crazy argument. For 3 years, I've spent 20 hours a week doing this, completely unpaid, and a lot of times my posts go unnoticed. Yes, I do have some that do really well, but sometimes, I hardly get any likes. Facebook is always trying to stop people seeing our posts and they just get washed away. And sometimes I'll spend hours on a really good post and no one will see it. So if I was wanting to seek attention, there would be much, much easier ways to do it. I could just go and put on a G-string and bend over at the beach if I was an attention seeker. This is not how you get attention. This is just a lot of hard work, very little glory, and often being treated really, really poorly along the way. I've done so many interviews with people where my time's been wasted. The recording machine didn't work and I went to the radio station and I'm like, oh, when's it going to be aired? And they're like, oh, when I'm ready, and then it's never aired, or I've asked for a copy of the interview and they said you'll have it in 2 days, and then a month later they send me nasty messages about not being ready. And there's so many horrible things that have happened. That's just a taste. That it's just humiliating and just a waste of my time and like a real kick in the guts to my self-esteem. So if I wanted glory, there's much easier paths to that.
Yeah, I just want to focus on what you said a moment ago about it would be easier to slip on a G-string and bend over and get attention that way. People often accuse social media, one platform in particular, Instagram, of being a platform that feeds narcissism and exhibitionism, because you see a lot of that content on Instagram, but you also see a lot of other content as well. Since you started this, I've really been surprised how many people on Instagram are using it for truly meaningful reasons, and they are concerned about these subjects as well. And as someone who is deeply interested in social media and works in social media, I can see that Instagram, even though there is a negative aspect to it, there is a really positive aspect to it as well, probably more so than the other social media platforms, because there are examples of people on Instagram who are actually demonstrating alternative and better ways of living. And I know just through my own personal use of Instagram, I've connected to people who share similar interests to me, particularly the ocean. And these are people that in my day-to-day life I would not be able to come into contact with because they live in different parts of the globe. So for me, I would say Instagram is my favourite platform because you don't have to follow the exhibitionists and the shallow content. There is so much other content, but we tend to like talking about the bad aspects of things, and there are bad aspects of social media, but this just seems to be human existence, doesn't it? We create a tool that can be really useful, but it's also used for really bad things as well.
Yes, we were watching a documentary the other day by Werner Herzog, and yes, it was a good documentary, but like what I found so horrific was someone's daughter was killed in a car accident and her body was mutilated. I won't describe it. And one of the paramedics took a photo and sent it to his colleagues, maybe for like a medical perspective. But then the photos went viral and people actually secretly sent the photos to the family with the most horrible, horrible messages you could believe, with images of their daughter like dead and looking her body in a terrible state. I just think that's the epitome of evil. There's no words to describe how evil these people are. So yes, social media is a tool for this. But on the other hand, there's so much positive because you can follow the people who have similar ethics to you and you don't have to expose yourself to beliefs that you don't agree with. When I say beliefs, I mean arrogance and people who are going to be nasty. But if we choose the people we want to follow, there's so much quality out there, and there's actually too much. There's too many people with amazing pages for me to keep up with them all. But yeah, so inspiring, so motivating, such a good example. People who have been doing it for a lot longer than me, and so much support. And I've noticed an explosion of people in the last couple of years setting up accounts similar to mine, and just like environmental accounts, just like wanting to share positive lifestyles and show their journey of trying to live more sustainably. It's just, there's so much beautiful content on social media, and it's their support that makes my work effective. If they weren't around, the work I'm doing would be pointless. It's a numbers game. I've always said it's a numbers game, and we all need these numbers to influence a change.
Going back to your detractors, I don't want to spend too much time on them. What would you say to someone who accused you of not providing solutions to this plastic problem? Is that even a fair accusation?
No, I actually provide a lot of solutions. I think about this constantly, and I'm a real problem solver. I love solving problems, and so I think about it all the time. I think about the psychology behind it, why we do it, how we can get out of it, how we can change, and I'm constantly offering solutions. The thing is, I present so much content and people are popping in and out of social media at their own leisure and according to their own schedule, that they may miss it. And so they may see all the protest posts or the complaints all my recipes and my garden, and they might just happen to miss the post I did that week that offers solutions. So it's not that I don't offer solutions, it's just that it just probably got lost in amongst all the other content and they missed it because I offer loads of solutions.
People who are already aware of subjects such as plastic pollution and plastic waste, they're already on board with this. Some of these people, I won't name names, they often can be your detractors because I've seen comments where people accuse you of shopping in we're in Australia, there's two big supermarkets that have a monopoly. Well, there's at least 4 chains, but the big two, Woolworths and Coles, you quite often shop at either Woolworths and Coles and you take photos within those massive supermarkets.
I live near a Woolworths. So I just happen to feature them more because I'm in their store more often. And I'm semi-rural, so it's hard for me to go to markets and things. So I'm more often in Woolworths than I do go to Coles, and definitely I feature them.
Right, but exactly. But the accusation is you are feeding the beast. You are giving these massive corporations who are doing the wrong thing your business. Why don't you just shop somewhere else? Even though that's going to be an imposition for you where you live, like why are you supporting them? Are you part of the problem by giving them your money?
Yes, I'm part of the problem by giving them my money, but I'm a much bigger part of the solution by highlighting what they're doing wrong and exposing it. I could bend over backwards and break myself by trying to shop at markets when there aren't any near me, trying to go to whole food places and buy very expensive organic grains for $10 a kilo versus $2 in the supermarket. When I'm on a low income, I could almost kill myself. And then I would be definitely using more fossil fuels because I'd be driving the car more. And so I choose, rather than to burn myself out and stress myself out and spend more money than I can afford, my choice is to live like an average person and shop in the stores average people shop, and to highlight the issues there, because the effect I could have by changing my personal lifestyle to become zero waste compared to the effect I can have by highlighting the mass plastic packaging in supermarkets, I definitely can have more impact if I focus on the supermarkets. If I can get them to change, everyone else changes. And even the local roadside stalls, I'm very lucky to live in an area where there's a lot of farmers and they sell produce out in front of their houses. It's brilliant. But most of them pack in plastic. And the local markets were packing in plastic, everything was in plastic. So even not shopping in the supermarket, even supporting markets, and Parkley markets, I've been supporting them. Sometimes it's beautiful and loose, other times completely heavily packaged. So, and I think they all copy Woolworths. Woolworths are the leaders. It's very cheap for anyone to buy plastic and bag it, and they can look like the big guys. So if I can get Woolworths, the key player in Australia, to change and reduce plastic, then it has a ricochet effect and everyone else reduces plastic too. I think that potential change is monumental compared to me trying to shop plastic free from markets that aren't near me.
Also, photographing excessively plastic wrapped fruit and vegetables within the big 2 supermarkets, when you use that as content to share your concern about the plastic issue, if you take those photos within Woolworths, Coles, don't want to just single out those two, there's also Audi and IGA, that content is going to resonate with more people because not everyone shops at farmers markets.
That's right.
So people who go to Woolworths daily or every second day, the content is actually going to be relevant to them, isn't it?
Yeah, and there are a lot of accounts out there that are pushing for markets and for zero waste and for shopping locally. I think that's covered, but I think there was a real void in the supermarkets being pressured to change their ways. So yeah, and because as you said, like the average person shops there, so people are going to relate to that. I know I have far more effect featuring the big supermarkets because people relate to it, they all shop there, they recognise the imagery, than if I try to get those same people to go to markets. Of course I would love them to shop at markets, but there's already people covering that. I don't want to do what anyone else is doing. I want to have a real effect in an area that is being neglected. And I think the supermarkets have gotten away with terrible behaviour for far too long. And it's time to shine a spotlight on their plastic obsession. And they don't intend to reduce it. That's the issue. So if I thought they were going to get better, I wouldn't worry. And I sat back and I waited for someone to come along and do something about it, because I thought, how can this be legal? And I waited and no one did anything. And while I was waiting, more and more plastic was being packaged. And then I started learning about Amazon and some of these other massive corporations that are using and implementing technology where you actually just walk through the checkout with your phone and you automatically charge, which means everything needs to be barcoded. And then I realized, because I was trying to work out, why are they doing it? Why on earth are they wrapping in plastic? And then I realized it's speed. So they're moving toward these new technologies. So they want to wrap everything so that people can either serve themselves at the self-serve terminal or walk out and their phone will just be charged. They'll be charged through their phone. And so it's going to get much, much worse. And my whole goal was to put a wedge in the door, just to like disrupt the system so that they just couldn't continue on with this mission to pack everything. And I do feel that I, with a lot of support, have put a wedge in the door, and they are now having to accommodate those of us who are demanding plastic-free produce. I just want to be a pain in their butt. I don't want to be like a mosquito just constantly buzzing around, annoying them. And I know I'm very annoying to them.
Yes, that's interesting, isn't it? Because this is shop talk now, but when we did a deep dive into what is called the analytics section of your Facebook page, buried at the bottom of one of the menus, there was a list of, what's the term? It was like external sources that were actually monitoring your page, and there was actually an entry from Woolworths. So Woolworths use software that they subscribe to, which will track all of their brand mentions across social media. That could be Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, whatever. And their software, which is completely legal, was also monitoring your page to track your mentions of them. So you were actually on their radar, even though they don't directly talk to you.
That was just such an achievement to know Woolworths is spying on me. Yes. I knew they were, but one of the frustrating things is they don't want me to know I'm having an effect. And so they do everything they can to not provide me with any evidence that anything they do is based on what I'm doing. And so it's really a little challenging, because I would love to go, there's so many changes and so many things I know that they've done because of my work. It's just been like directly in response to particular posts I've done. And it's so obvious to me. I can see all the workings of it, but they won't do anything that lets me provide a physical link to show that it's because of me. One day someone will come out and they'll tell me, and I'll get proof. But for now, it's just my guilty pleasure to know that they've made a lot of changes and done a lot of things. Some of them are very shallow, but it's enough for satisfaction. Like they're changing some of their marketing and some of their ads. And I actually saw a commercial being made, and I heard the director giving directions to the actors and the crew to make the loose celery sit higher in the trolley so that it could be seen better by the camera. I just did a video yesterday where I was a bit full on. They'd have a new ad at the front of their store, and it shows the home delivery service. So you know that I've focused a lot on their home delivery service. I wrote a lengthy article for a magazine who commissioned me, and then they refused to print it. And then a few months later, I published it myself, and it got a lot of support. And I believe that Woolworths have improved. Yeah, just after my article was published, because I was focusing that they were charging $3.50 to use a crate to bench service, which was meant to be plastic bag free. It turned out it wasn't plastic bag free, and just after my article was published, they dropped it to $2. So that was a huge achievement, to know that little old me in an outskirts town, just a mum working away on her computer, could get a major corporation to change the pricing structure. If you can get a corporation to change any policy and procedure, that is monumental. And they also were packing a lot of the produce in plastic. I did a great video about that too. And just the ad yesterday, they had this beautiful crate with no plastic at all. And I know that's not possible, because there was a baguette in there, and they don't sell loose baguettes. And some of the other produce I know would definitely be packed. So if you see beautiful crates of food in the front of Woolworths stores on an ad, that ad was probably created because of me. So just funny little things like that. But also some of the pricing structure in their stores after certain posts, when I've featured that a product has been a lot more expensive if it's loose, the next day it's been a third of the price. So things like that have been rewarding to know that I've affected the pricing structure. But the things never last long. It's basically just to placate you or for them to create new evidence to counter posts I've done. But then within a week or two, they just go back to their own old ways. So it's constant. It's a constant war because they've got a mission to go in one direction and I'm just trying to stop them.
Yeah, it is a constant war. Earlier, though, you mentioned what I believe is the elephant in the room. You mentioned Amazon, and just to speak from Woolworths' perspective, like while they are a heavy offender with promoting plastic wrap produce, they know that Amazon is flexing its muscles. They know Amazon is expanding around the globe. And you mentioned a term before, frictionless. So all businesses today, this is the holy grail, is to create frictionless customer interactions where you go in and out. Like you won't even stop to swipe the item through the checkout. It'll just know it's already in your basket because your app on your phone or whatever device will be tracking that. So Woolworths say, oh, well, we wrap our fruit and vegetables to avoid theft at the checkout, but really they're creating a environment where people will be able to buy things instantly without stopping because they know Amazon is already ahead of the curve with this technology. And while Amazon don't have a heavy presence in Australia, they will probably at some point in the future have their own grocery stores as well, and they'll already have the technological infrastructure in place. So Woolworths, in a way, is like playing catch up. So this really reframes the battle you're having. Like, what would you expect Woolworths to do in this situation? Because if they don't attempt to match what's coming down the track, like it's conceivable that they could die. Like Bunnings in the UK. Bunnings is monolithic in Australia. They expanded to the UK and like they failed in the UK. It's inconceivable, but Woolworths at some point in time in the future may cease to exist because of the actions of a company like Amazon.
Yeah, well, I actually feel sorry for Woolworths because they've suddenly got this new battle on their hands, and their goal being to just provide the best return for their shareholders, and now they've got this monolithic company just coming, like breathing over them like a dragon, trying to take the market share. But I don't know if you know the latest trend which is being implemented right now, is a delivery service within 2 hours. So you order your groceries at home and they're at your door in 2 hours. And now this is a monumental problem. I'm bringing this in with your Amazon issue because this is what's making these changes happen, and Woolworths is trying to prepare for that as well. So this is a major problem with where we're going in relation to plastic packaging, because you order in, and if it's at your door in 2 hours, the amount of packaging is going to be horrific because they're going to chuck everything in bags and bags. And so this is a whole new war. Is this home delivery service. And again, it's feeding into this sense of entitlement that we've been led to believe is ours, that we can have anything we want, anytime we want, packaged in as much plastic as we want, and it's our human right. And so this other enormous war is about to start with home delivery, and people are just going to love it. They are going to be so happy with this service because we just want to feel like kings and queens, and this home delivery service makes us feel really, really special. It saves us time. It's really convenient. It's absolutely detrimental to the environment. The amount of plastic being produced and that will be used for this is going to be horrendous. So that's something we need to really focus on.
So just to clarify this, if as a conscious consumer you brought your own reusable bags to the supermarket, you buy loose produce, you do all the right thing, the amount of plastic is going to increase exponentially in conjunction with these home delivery services because you will not be able to make those decisions while using these services.
Exactly. So while there is a very small percentage of us who are waking up and we're taking the time to do our own shopping and to not use plastic, and we're being extremely diligent, at the same time, average consumers, there's an explosion of plastic being used with home delivery services, and it's going to get a lot worse. And another example is we had War on Waste in Australia, which was a wonderful show on the ABC, really highlighting the issue of coffee cups. And they were starting to get cafes to encourage BYO cups, and was going really well, and highlighting how many disposable cups were being thrown out. And there was a real shift. And then at the same time, apps were being developed so that you could order your coffee from a cafe through your app. So you can go, okay, I want like 3 lattes for the office, put it through your app and go pick it up 10 minutes later. Now, that's not an option for using BYO cups. And so there's, at the same time as people are like becoming conscious and buying BYO cups, now there's also a reverse explosion of disposable cups being used because of these apps. And the same with home delivery services like Uber Eats and things like this. Those of us who are like working really hard to BYO container, it's just so easy to order online and go pick it up in half an hour rather than waiting there with your own container. So we're fighting this like world addicted to convenience and self-entitlement and disposability. It's just such an enormous issue.
While we're moving to frictionless transactions and convenience, it just seems that more and more money is being funneled into less and less companies that are providing more of these services. So I just think at some point in the future we'll look at how many businesses have disappeared, and we'll sort of scratch our heads and go, what happened?
Yes. And, you know, going back to the earlier comment about like, why don't we support markets? Well, I do support markets, and we need to really make sure that's part of our expenditure as well. So as well as shopping at the supermarkets, I support lots and lots of small businesses and markets, and we all should be doing that. I'm not at all a fundamentalist, and I don't believe in doing 100% anything, because we'll all have nervous breakdowns, but dedicating some of our time and money and resources to things that are environmentally friendly. So let's spend a certain percentage of our income in small businesses, roadside stalls, small markets, businesses that sell zero waste. Let's really make sure these businesses don't collapse by under the weight of these enormous monolithic corporations who are taking the mass money from the larger population. We need to support these small businesses for them to survive. They need us. It's part of our obligation to our planet is to help all these small businesses.
Yeah, and usually if you buy something from a roadside stall or a smaller business, you tend to feel better about it. Like, you rarely feel good about buying something from the supermarket.
Yeah, you don't really go home and go, well, that was like a rewarding experience. I often go, I've developed a relationship with a grocery store holder. He has a beautiful shop in a small shopping centre and a huge stall at Parklea Markets. And it's just been wonderful having conversations with him and learning about the produce and where it comes from and the challenges that he faces in relation to plastic. And there's another stall holder there who grows his own potatoes and apples out near Orange, and it feels so good to buy straight from the grower and to cut out the middleman. I highly recommend it. You know, that the money's not being lost somewhere in between. It's going straight to the grower, and they work so hard. So yeah, give as much of our dollars as we can to the growers, and we'll feel good for it too.
Excellent. Well, we're just over an hour, so I think this will be our first podcast.
Well, there's a lot of topics we didn't cover, so maybe there'll be more podcasts to come.
Yes, you mentioned you're not a fundamentalist. I think that's a great subject.
That's a juicy one.
Fundamentalism. So I hope the people listening to this found this entertaining, because this was essentially the type of conversation that we have in the kitchen, and we've recorded this podcast in the kitchen, so we should do this again.
Yeah, so hopefully if you like it, let us know. And we'll do some more, and you're welcome to tell us if there's any topics that you want us to nut out together. And thank you so much for taking the time to listen to us today.
Okay, before you go, Anita, where can people go to find out about you? Okay,
so there's a few places. My website is anitahoran.com. It has loads of stuff there. Please check it out. There's some really good blog posts that have been very popular, and links to my 2 books. And also Facebook and Instagram is Anita from Australia. So Facebook and Instagram, Anita from Australia, and Twitter.
Yeah, Twitter is a bit different, isn't it? Because it wouldn't fit Anita from Australia, so it's just Anita from AUS, Anita from Oz.
I'm now LinkedIn too, aren't I? Just got into LinkedIn.
Yeah, such an unusual platform, LinkedIn, but it's really hot at the moment.
Okay.
We will have links to all your channels in the show notes.
Great.
This was fun, Anita. Let's do it again.
Thanks, Tim.